My son won $15 million in the lottery and kicked me out. 3 days later, he begged for help. Before beginning to tell this story, comment where you see us from and subscribe so you don't miss more stories. The hum of the refrigerator was the sound of my life, a constant, familiar, almost hypnotic buzz that had marked the silences of my dawn hours for the last 12 years. It was the soundtrack to my thoughts, my worries, the endless mental lists of bills to pay and silent prayers asking that my hip would hold up for one more shift, standing behind the diner counter. That night, the sound was different. It wasn't the usual hum, but a sharp lament, a metallic whine that seemed to scrape the silence of the small apartment. I ignored it. It was just one more on the long list of things that were about to break and for which there was no money. I settled into the armchair, the usual one, the one that had the shape of my body carved into the worn fabric of the backrest. On the coffee table, the steaming cup of tea and the lottery ticket. It wasn't a ritual. It was an act of desperate faith. Every Tuesday and Friday, I bought a Powerball ticket with the change left from tips. It wasn't much, just a couple of dollars, but they were $2 that bought dreams for 48 hours. Dreaming was free, wasn't it? Dreaming of paying off the mortgage on this hovel that had been our refuge since Roberto left us. Dreaming of sending my son Leo to a good university without him getting into debt up to his eyeballs. Dreaming of a hip operation that wouldn't leave me limping. Dreaming of rest, just rest. Leo, my boy, my man. He was 19 years old and had a rage inside that sometimes scared me. A dull, silent rage that he'd carried since his father left with that secretary from his office, leaving us with a debt that still drowned us, and the echo of a "you're not enough" that was never spoken, but that crept through every crack in this house. I worked double shifts at the diner, cleaning on weekends. I gave him everything I could. Decent clothes, hot food, a roof. I gave him love in torrents, a love that perhaps was too protective, too condescending, trying to fill the void that his father had excavated. But it wasn't enough. Nothing was. He wanted the life he saw on Instagram, the cars, the $200 sneakers, freedom without effort, and I could only offer him effort without freedom. That Friday, the drawing was especially big. 180 million, an obscene figure, unimaginable. While the TV host, with a smile of teeth too white, began to draw the balls, I closed my eyes and whispered, "Please, for Leo, for us." The first ball, 17, Leo's birthday. The second, 23, mine. I sat up. My heart began to beat in my throat. The third, 42. The number of our old apartment, the one we had to leave. I couldn't breathe. I put my hand on my chest, feeling the wild flight under the bones. The fourth, 8. His lucky number in high school football. No, it can't be. The whisper came out ragged, an incredulous prayer. The fifth, 11. The day of the month he was born. And the Powerball 3. The age he was when his father left. The world stopped. The refrigerator's hum disappeared. The sound of the street vanished. Only the numbers on the television screen existed, blinking, obscene, and the numbers scribbled on the piece of paper that trembled between my fingers. They matched, all of them, every damn number. A sound escaped from my throat, something between a scream and a sob. I covered my mouth with both hands, as if I could contain the explosion of life that had just occurred inside me. I stood up, staggering. My legs wouldn't respond. I looked around, at the poor but clean room, at Leo's photos on the shelf, at the worn floor. Everything seemed different. Everything was different. "Leo," I screamed, running toward his room. "Leo, wake up." He was lying on the bed, with headphones on, looking at his phone. He looked at me with annoyance, pulling off one of the earbuds. "What's wrong, Mom?" Another mouse? He said in that sleepy and slightly irritated voice he always used with me lately. I waved the ticket in front of his face, crying and laughing at the same time, unable to form a coherent sentence. The numbers. My life. The numbers. He frowned, took the ticket, and looked at the TV, where the numbers were still showing in an endless loop. His expression changed from annoyance to confusion, then to disbelief, and finally to a kind of nuclear shock that erased any trace of sleep or adolescence from his face. He jumped up, pulling off the other earbud. Is it real?" he murmured, taking the ticket and comparing it again and again with the screen. "Mom, this is 180 million, I said, gasping. "After taxes, it'll be like 90, maybe more." "Leo," I hugged him with a strength I didn't know I had, and for a second, a brief and precious second, he hugged me with the same strength. He was my boy again, the one who ran to hug me when he got hurt at the park. He smelled like sleep and cheap shampoo, and in that instant, it was perfect. "We're saved," I whispered in his ear, crying on his shoulder. "We're finally saved." The euphoria lasted as long as it takes for a firework to explode, brilliant, blinding, and then silence and darkness. The first 2 days were a feverish dream. Journalists ringing the doorbell and calling on the phone. Neighbors who had never spoken a word to us smiling like hyenas at the door. Lawyers and financial advisors sending letters with urgency expressed in red letters. Leo became the general of a war that didn't exist. He locked himself in his room with the laptop, talking on the phone in a low and authoritative tone I didn't know. I tried to approach, ask questions, propose plans. "Honey, we should talk to a trusted accountant, Mr. Henderson from the church." "Leave it to me, Mom. You don't understand these things." He cut me off, without even looking up from the screen. "But Leo, the money, we have to be prudent. Pay the debts. Put something aside." "I know," he shouted, exasperated. "For once in your life, stop acting like a poor person and let me handle it. I know what I'm doing." Each word was a little knife. Like a poor person. I had spent my whole life fighting so we wouldn't lack anything, so we wouldn't feel poor, and now my struggle was my stigma. The morning of the third day, I woke up with a strange sensation, a calm. The noise had ceased. There were no journalists at the door. The silence was deep, almost ominous. I made myself coffee, looking out the window at the rain that was beginning to fall. Today, I told myself, today I sit down with him and we talk like adults. I tell him I want to pay for university, settle the mortgage, donate something to the nursing home where my mother worked, and maybe, just maybe, buy myself a car that doesn't have to be started with faith and a push. The door to his room opened. Leo came out, dressed in clothes I didn't recognize. Some new sneakers, shiny ones, that must have cost more than my monthly salary. A sweatshirt with a huge logo. He looked like a stranger, a handsome and cold stranger. "Mom, sit down. We need to talk." His tone was flat, professional, as if he were about to fire me from a job I didn't know I had. I sat on the edge of the armchair, the coffee suddenly bitter in my mouth. "I've been thinking," he began, standing in front of me, with his hands in his pockets, "and I've made some decisions. This money, it's an opportunity to start over, to build a real life." "Of course, honey," I said, forcing a smile. "That's why I wanted to talk to you. To plan our new beginning." He shook his head slowly, and in his eyes there was no trace of the boy I had hugged 2 days ago. There was a glacial determination. "No. My new beginning." The world contracted. "What do you mean?" "I mean I earned this myself." The phrase fell like a slab. "You? How do you say that?" My voice trembled, treacherous. "The ticket, you bought it with my money." "Your money?" "It was change from shopping, Leo." It was my tips. Tips that you took from me for the house, he said, with a twisted and brutal logic. Money that was mine. Therefore the ticket is mine. The prize is mine. I stared at him, unable to articulate a word. It was as if he had hit me in the stomach with a bat. I couldn't breathe. I've consulted with a lawyer, he continued, imperturbable. Although the ticket is in your name, having been bought with funds that could be considered mine, there would be a long legal battle, a battle that you can't afford, and that I now can. A legal battle? I managed to stammer. Against your mother? It's not personal, it's business. That phrase, so trite, so cruel. Look, Mom, you and I, we want different things. You want to stay here, in this town, with your small life. I want more. I need space. I need freedom. Freedom from what? From me? Tears began to run down my cheeks, hot and silent. Don't make this about you, he exploded, his coldness breaking for an instant. Always the same. The drama, the guilt. I'm sick of it. Sick of living in misery. Sick of your sermons. Sick of your frying oil smell that permeates everything. Each word was a stab, meticulously placed in the places only a mother knows. I stood up, staggering, leaning on the back of the armchair. My smell? I whispered, wounded to the soul. Yes. This apartment smells like poverty, like effort, like defeat, and I don't want to smell it ever again. He approached the coffee table and took his wallet. New, leather. He pulled out a wad of bills, $100 bills. It must have been $10,000. He threw them on the coffee table, next to my cup of coffee. There you have it. It's more than you've earned in the last 2 years. With that, you can find yourself a place, a motel or something. I have to do renovations here. Start from scratch. Kick me out? The word sounded absurd, surreal. From my own house? My house, he corrected, hitting his chest with his index finger. The mortgage is in your name. But with the prize, I'll pay it off today. The stay. It's not suitable for my plans. I need you to leave, today. I looked at the wad of bills. I looked at his face, hardened, transformed by a wealth that was not yet tangible, but had already possessed him completely. The boy I breastfed, whose scraped knees I healed, for whom I cried with pride on his graduation day, had died. In his place was a greedy and cruel stranger. Leo, please, was all I could say. My pride, my dignity, shattered on the floor, along with those bills that stained everything. No, he said, and his voice regained its coldness. Pack your things, the ones you want. I have an appointment with an interior designer in an hour. I don't want you here when he arrives. He turned his back on me and headed to his room. The door closed. The click of the latch sounded like the slam of a tomb. I stood there, standing in the center of the room that had been my world, our world, for 12 long years. The smell of coffee, mixed with the smell of rain, and the expensive perfume of Leo's new sweatshirt, which now floated in the air like a poisonous gas, smells like poverty, like effort, like defeat. I moved like an automaton. I didn't cry anymore. The pain was too deep for tears. It was a cosmic void, an absolute silence in the soul. I took an old travel bag from the closet and began to put things in it. Photos, some clothes, my mother's cheap jewelry. I also took the wad of bills, with physical repulsion, and put it in the purse. It wasn't a gift. It was the price of my exile. In less than half an hour I was ready. I had nowhere to go. My sister lived in Arizona. But we weren't close. My friends, they all lived day to day like me. I couldn't show up at their door with a bag and swollen eyes. I opened the front door. The rain was falling hard now, hitting the concrete floor of the porch. I turned around to take one last look. The room was empty, silent, waiting to be transformed, erased, like me. Leo's door opened. He came out with his phone in his hand. "Are you still here?" he said, with impatience. I didn't answer. I just looked at him, trying to find in his eyes a glimmer of remorse, of humanity. There was nothing, just haste. "You're going to get wet," he added, as if talking about the weather. I nodded slowly and went out, closing the door behind me. The sound of the latch closing from the inside was the most definitive sound I've heard in my life. I walked in the rain, the bag hitting my leg. I had no destination. I just walked. Cars passed by buzzing, splashing me with dirty water. People ran to take shelter under awnings. The world went on its course, oblivious to my personal catastrophe. I found a bench at a bus stop, semi-protected by a broken marquee. I sat down, soaked, shivering. I took out my phone. The screen lit up with a photo of Leo smiling. As a little boy, with a missing tooth, I turned off the phone. I couldn't look at him. The hours passed. The rain subsided, then stopped. Night began to fall. Cold and damp, I curled up on the bench, hugging my bag. The bills in my purse seemed to burn, reminding me of the price my son had put on our life together, $10,000, for 12 years of love and sacrifice. I don't know at what moment I fell asleep. Fatigue, shock, overcame me. It was a restless sleep, full of nightmares, in which I chased a Leo who laughed at me while driving away in a sports car. The sound of a phone woke me up. It wasn't mine. It rang and rang insistent, from inside my bag, confused, still caught in the claws of sleep. I opened the bag. It was Leo's phone. It must have fallen when I took out mine. Or maybe I put it without realizing it among my things in my state of shock. I picked it up. The screen illuminated the darkness of the bus stop. Private call. I let it ring. It wasn't my business. It was no longer my business. But whoever it was insisted. Call after call. A knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. Something wasn't right. At 3 in the morning, they only call with bad news. Finally, after the 5th consecutive call, I answered. I didn't say anything. I just brought the phone to my ear. "Hello?" I said, my voice hoarse from the cold and disuse. "Mom?" It was Leo. But it wasn't his voice. It was the voice of a terrified child. A sharp whimper, broken by sobs he couldn't contain. "Leo? What's wrong? Where are you?" I jumped up, my heart galloping again, but now driven by fear, not joy. "Mom," he moaned, and broke into open tears, with a desolation that froze my blood. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please." "What's happening, son? Talk," I begged, gripping the phone so hard I feared breaking it. "They came," he sobbed, his voice trembling, almost unintelligible. "2 men, big ones, with masks. They were waiting inside, in the house." I felt the ground open under my feet. Inside the house. "Have they hurt you? Are you injured?" My maternal instinct, appeased, trampled and exiled, just hours before, emerged with a primal scorching force. "No, no," he gasped. "They tied me up. They covered my mouth. They wanted the money. I told them it wasn't there, that it was all electronic, that in the bank." I breathed relieved for a second. He was alive. But his voice broke in a new access of panic. "But they didn't believe me. They started to destroy everything, looking, saying they knew I had cashed, that there had to be cash. They found the envelope with what I gave you, the $10,000, the price of my exile. They got more furious. They said they were going to kill me, that it was misery, that they were going to cut me to pieces if I didn't tell them where the rest was." His words came out, rushed, mixed with hiccups and moans of terror. One of them had a knife. Mom. It was huge. He put it to my neck. I felt the edge. I told them you had it. He sobbed, ashamed, broken. I told them you had taken the money so they would leave me alone. They laughed. They beat me up. They broke my phone. They took what was there. I heard the sound of broken glass in the background. It must have been his. They left a minute ago. I managed to get loose. Mom. His voice was reduced to a terrified, childish whisper. I'm scared. What if they come back? They said they would return, that if I had lied to them, that they would really kill me. He cried uncontrollably, and I could visualize his body trembling, huddled in some corner of the house that was no longer a home, but a trap. Leo, listen to me, I said, with a calm I didn't feel, with the firm voice of the mother who knows she is the only anchor in her son's storm. Are you hurt? Are you bleeding? I don't know. Everything hurts. I think not, just bruised, he babbled. I'm going to call the police. Right now. Stay where you are. Don't hang up. No, he screamed, with renewed panic. No, Mom. No. They said if I called the police they would kill me, that they have friends everywhere, that they would know. Please no. The paranoia of terror was absolute. There was no way to reason. Okay, I said, trying to calm him. I won't call. Where are you now? In the closet. In the hallway. I hid. My poor boy, scared like a cornered animal in his own house. Listen to me carefully, I said, and my mind, numbed by pain hours before, now worked at breakneck speed, calculating, planning, protecting. I'm going to come, right now. Do you think they're completely gone? Do you hear anything? No, just the dripping faucet. They broke things, he sobbed. Mom, please, come. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I failed you. Please, don't leave me alone. Help me. His plea destroyed me and reconstructed me at the same time. It was the confirmation of all my pain, but also the return of my son from the abyss of greed into which he had fallen. Money had corrupted him, but fear had brought him back to reality. To me, don't move, I ordered, with a voice that brooked no discussion. I'm coming. Now, don't hang up. Stay on the line with me. No, he murmured, weakly. The battery, it's running out. The screen broke. It doesn't charge well. Panic returned. The only thread that connected us was as fragile as he was. How much battery do you have? 1%, he said, and his voice sounded distorted, distant. Mom, I'm scared. Hold on, son. Hold on. Mom is on her way. I grabbed my bag and started running. The street was deserted, illuminated by streetlights that reflected in the puddles. I ran like I hadn't run since I was a girl. I ran with the hip pain screaming, with my heart about to explode, with the phone glued to my ear. Leo, are you still there? Silence. Leo, a sound of static, a gasp. Yes, it was a barely audible whisper. I'm coming. Almost there. I kept running. The blocks felt eternal. Finally, I spotted the house. Ours. His house. The lights were on in the living room, but one of them flickered irregularly, as if it had been hit. The front door was ajar, swaying slightly in the night wind. A sinister sight. Arriving, I gasped, out of breath. Are you still in the closet? No response. Leo, just a creak, and then the line went dead. No. I screamed at the dead phone. Leo. I didn't know if it had been the battery, or if I didn't allow myself to think it. With the last strength I had left, I crossed the front yard, jumping over the flower beds that had cost me so much to maintain. The door creaked when I pushed it wide open. The scene that was revealed before me was one of methodical and violent destruction. Overturned furniture, torn cushions, the television smashed on the floor, glass everywhere. The paintings, including Leo's childhood photos, ripped from the walls and trampled. It smelled of violence, of sweat, of fear. "Leo," I called, my voice echoing in the eerie silence of the house. No response. I advanced carefully, dodging the debris, my heart beating so hard I felt the pulse in my ears. The hallway was dark. The ceiling light was broken. I pressed the switch. Nothing. "Leo, it's me, Mom." A muffled sob, weak. It came from the hallway closet, the one that stored the bedding and towels. I ran there. The door was closed. I grabbed the knob. "No, don't open," shouted a voice from inside, full of panic. It could be them. "It's me, honey. It's Mom," I said, struggling to open the door. It seemed to have something jammed. "You're safe. I've come." I struggled, and finally, the door gave way. And there he was, crouched among sheets and blankets, huddled in the darkest corner. I saw him before my eyes fully adapted to the gloom. His face was swollen, one eye closed, his lips split and bleeding. He trembled uncontrollably, hugging his knees. His gaze was glassy, lost in terror. But when he saw me, he completely broke down. "Mom," he moaned, and threw himself at me. I hugged him with all my strength, falling to my knees among the scattered clothes. He clung to me, burying his face in my shoulder, sobbing convulsively, shaking like a leaf. I stroked his hair, whispering soothing words that I didn't even feel myself. "It's over, my boy. It's over. Mom is here. Nothing's going to happen to you. I'm sorry," he repeated over and over, between sobs. "Forgive me. Please, forgive me. I kicked you out. I said those horrible things. The money, it drove me crazy. I don't know what happened to me." His words were a desperate torrent, drowned by crying and pain. "Hush, honey. Hush. It doesn't matter now. All that matters is that you're safe," I murmured, although each of his words of repentance confirmed the depth of the wound he had inflicted. But this wasn't the time. The danger could still be latent. "Are you sure they left?" I asked, scanning the darkness of the hallway from our precarious hideout. "I think so. I heard the door slam, and a car starting very fast," he said, trembling. "But they said they would come back, that if they didn't get the money." He shuddered again, and I hugged him tighter. The smell of his sweat, mixed with the sweet iron of blood and the dust of the closet, was overwhelming. My son, my wounded, terrified, and repentant son. All the resentment, rage, and pain that had grown in my chest like poisonous weeds during the last few hours vanished, replaced by a protective instinct so fierce it almost left me breathless. I didn't forgive, not yet, but protecting him was a physical necessity, as vital as breathing. "They won't come back," I said, with a firmness I didn't feel. "But we can't stay here. We have to leave. Now." "Leave? Where?" His voice sounded small, lost. "I don't know. But far from here. Get up. Can you walk?" He nodded. Weakly, and between the two of us we managed to stand up. He leaned on me, and I noticed how he shuddered with each movement. The arm that surrounded my shoulders weighed like lead. We left the closet, advancing clumsily through the devastated hallway. Each room we saw was a new reminder of the violence he had suffered. In his room, the mattress was slashed from side to side, the white foam coming out like the entrails of an animal. The desk, where he had planned his new future of wealth, was in splinters. "They had it all planned," Leo murmured, looking at the destruction with horror. "They knew I had won. They knew I was alone." A question began to form in my mind. Embryonic but disturbing. How did they know? The news was public. Yes, but the details, the address, the timing. Take what you can. Clothes, passport, money, if there's any left, I told him, gently pushing him toward what remained of his closet. While he, moving like a sleepwalker, rummaged through the broken drawers, I approached the window in his room that faced the street. The night was still, too still. The streetlights projected circles of yellowish light on the wet pavement. Nothing moved, and then I saw it. A car, black, big, without markings, parked half a block away, right in the deep shadow between two streetlights. It didn't have its lights on. There was no one inside that I could see, or so it seemed. My heart skipped a beat. Were they still there, or was it just paranoia, fed by Leo's fear and the adrenaline running through my veins? "Mom," Leo called in a low voice. He had grabbed a backpack and was putting some clothes in it. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," I lied, moving away from the window. "Hurry up." While he finished, I went to my former bedroom. The door was wide open. Inside, the spectacle was equally desolating. My drawers, emptied. My mother's jewelry box, forced and empty. The few things of sentimental value, scattered on the floor. But in a corner, semi-hidden under the torn comforter, I saw the small wooden chest where I kept important documents. By some miracle, it was intact. I opened it. Our passports, the house deeds, my birth certificate, and the envelope with the rest of the money Leo had given me. I had only spent one bill for the taxi I never took. I took everything and put it in my bag. I returned to the living room, where Leo was waiting for me, pale and trembling, with the backpack on his back. "Let's go," I said, taking his hand. It was frozen. We advanced toward the front door, stepping on glass and debris. Each creak under our feet made me shudder. As we crossed the threshold, once again, I couldn't help but look toward the black car. It was still there, motionless, silent, sinister. "Don't look," I whispered, pulling Leo toward the opposite side of the street, moving away from that vehicle. "Walk normally, but fast." We walked. The night enveloped us, humid and cold. I didn't know where to go. A hotel would be the obvious choice, but it required identification, left a trail. If the men in the black car were who I feared, they could look for us there. Roadside motels, the cheapest and most discreet, were miles away. We had no car. "Where are we going?" Leo asked, his voice broken by the pain of his wounds and the effort of walking. "Away from here," was all I could say. We walked 2 streets in silence, only broken by our labored breathing and the distant rumble of the highway. I looked over my shoulder every few seconds. The street was empty, until it wasn't. The headlights appeared first in the distance, at the end of the street we had just passed. 2 bright points that grew with alarming speed. It wasn't the leisurely pace of a neighbor returning home. It was a powerful, determined acceleration. "Leo," I said, squeezing his hand. The car, a black SUV, the same one that had been parked, without a doubt, accelerated and stopped abruptly next to us. The tinted glass of the driver's window rolled down with an electric hum. I didn't look. I didn't stop. "Run!" I shouted at Leo, and we started running. My legs, already sore and tired, protested with sharp screams of pain. Leo ran beside me, gasping, clutching his side. We heard the car doors open and slam shut. Voices. 2 men. Big ones. As he had said. "Hey, stop!" shouted a hoarse, impersonal voice. We didn't stop. We turned the corner, entering an alley I knew from my walks. It was a shortcut to a more commercial area, with more light, maybe with people, but it was long and narrow, flanked by tall wooden fences. "Mom, I can't," Leo moaned, visibly limping. "Yes, you can," I ordered, almost shouting, pulling his arm. "Don't stop." The footsteps behind us were heavy, fast. They were getting closer. They didn't shout anymore. They just ran. That was even more terrifying. Halfway down the alley, a fence had a loose board. I pointed it out to him. Through there. I pushed the board, which gave way with a crack, revealing a small empty lot full of weeds. I pushed Leo through the gap and squeezed in after him. Just as the figures of the two men entered the alley, we crouched behind the fence, gasping, holding our breath. We heard their footsteps approach, then slow down. They were right on the other side of the fence. "Where did they go?" said a voice, rough, with a hint of frustration. "They have to be around here." "Check," said the other, calmer, but with an authority that chilled the blood. The flashlights turned on, sweeping the alley. A powerful beam of light passed over our heads, illuminating the weeds around us. We crouched lower, pressed to the cold, damp ground. Leo trembled against me. I put a hand over his mouth, gently to silence any sound. The footsteps moved away, then returned. Nothing. They vanished. The man with the calm voice cursed under his breath. "It doesn't matter. We know who they are. We know where they would go. They won't go far." "And the boy?" He said the mother took the money. A dry, cruel laugh. "Lying. He's a scared kid. The money is somewhere in that house. Or he has it. We'll go back, or we'll find the mother. She'll talk." The sound of their footsteps moved away, back toward the car. We heard the doors close, and the engine start, moving away little by little, until silence took over the night again. We stayed crouched in the weeds, not moving, for what seemed like an eternity. Fear had us paralyzed. Finally, I dared to look through the gap in the fence. The alley was empty. I collapsed against the fence, my strength suddenly abandoning me. Leo curled up beside me, burying his face in my shoulder. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered, over and over, like a broken mantra. "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." I hugged him, looking toward the night, overwhelmed by a new and terrifying reality. This hadn't ended. It had just begun. My son hadn't just won a fortune. He had attracted a curse. And now, that curse was pursuing both of us. "Listen to me, Leo," I said, my voice so cold and flat that even I was surprised. He looked up. His swollen eyes full of tears reflected the faint moonlight filtering through the clouds. "Forget the regret. Forget the fear. Now there's only one thing that matters: survive. Do you understand me?" He nodded, slowly, swallowing. "Those men, they weren't just any thieves. They knew too much, and they found you too quickly." The seed of suspicion I had planted before sprouted with force. "Leo, who did you tell? Who did you tell that you had won? Who did you brag to?" His expression changed from fear to confusion, and then to a horror of a completely new quality, the horror of betrayal. Only one person," he stammered, paling even more. If possible, he was the first to congratulate me. The only one who seemed to understand. "Who, Leo?" I insisted, gripping his shoulders. "Tell me." He opened his mouth to say a name, but at that precise moment, the phone I had returned to him, the one he had in the pocket of his sweatshirt, vibrated with a soft hum. Both of us froze. It wasn't a call, it was a notification. With a trembling hand, he took out the phone. The broken screen lit up, showing a text message. The sender's name made a wave of ice run down my back. It was from Jake, his best friend since childhood, the boy I had brought home so many times for dinner, whose scraped knees I had mended alongside Leo's, whom I considered almost like a second son. The message was brief, so brief it was lethal. "Jake, everything okay, dude? I heard weird noises at your house. Those guys seemed heavy. Need me to give you a hand with something?" Leo looked up at me. His eyes were two wells of absolute betrayal and terror. Jake lived at least 15 minutes away by car. He hadn't heard anything. Unless he knew exactly what was going to happen and when. It was him, Leo whispered. And the sound was that of his world of friendship and loyalty crumbling into dust. I told him everything. I told him I was kicking you out, that the house would be only mine, that we could have parties. He told me we should celebrate last night, that he would bring some friends. The puzzle piece clicked into place with a sinister click. Jake's friends. The phone vibrated again in Leo's hand. Jake again. Jake, hey dude. Those guys, if they found you, don't tell them we talked, okay? For my safety, you understand. Good luck. It was a confirmation. A cowardly, selfish confirmation. Jake had sold Leo out. He had told them when he would be alone. Where? And now he was washing his hands. Leo looked at the message, and then looked at me. In his eyes there was no longer any trace of the arrogant teenager who had kicked me out of the house. There was only a terrified, betrayed, and completely lost child. Mom, he said, and his voice was a thread of a voice, loaded with devastating understanding. What have I done? Before I could answer, the phone vibrated for the third time. But this time, it wasn't a message from Jake. It was an unknown number. The text was terse, anonymous, and each word was a drop of ice on the nape of the neck. Unknown number. Stop running. It's not personal. It's business. Give us the money, and we'll forget your face. Keep playing, and we'll forget you had a mother. Leo let out a choked moan, and the phone fell from his hands onto the wet grass. Both of us looked at the cracked screen, illuminating the weeds at our feet with its ghostly light. They weren't just two thugs. It was something more organized, something much more dangerous. And worst of all, they knew my number. They knew who I was. The threat was explicit. The silence that surrounded us then was not just the absence of sound. It was the palpable presence of danger, of a net closing around us, of a game whose rules we completely ignored, but in which we were irremediably trapped. And in that silence, under the cold light of the moon, hidden in an abandoned lot, with my wounded and terrified son beside me, I knew that the nightmare was far from over, that the $15 million were not a prize. They were a target painted on our backs, and that the only person in the world I could trust was myself. The hum of the phone against the wet earth was the only sound in the world, an obscene vibration that seemed to emanate from hell itself. The light from the cracked screen illuminated our faces from below, projecting monstrous and dancing shadows that turned my son into a specter and me into a statue of horror carved in stone. We'll forget you had a mother. The words floated in the air, as tangible and poisonous as gas from a chamber. It wasn't a threat. It was a sentence, a promise. And the most terrifying thing was its impersonality, its business. The same phrase that Leo had spat at me hours before now returned, deformed in a grotesque mirror, to devour us. Leo gasped, hiccuping, on the verge of shock. His eyes, swollen and glassy, didn't leave the device, as if a rattlesnake were coiled around it. Mom was all he could articulate, a plea that came from the most primitive and terrified place in his soul. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. Every instinct, every fiber of my being, focused on a single task: survival. The pain in my hip, the exhaustion, the betrayal, the heartbreaking pain for the son I had lost, and the man I had found, everything compressed into a ball of incandescent steel in the center of my chest. I was no longer Carmen, the single mother, the waitress with the broken hip. At that moment, under the cold moon and the gaze of those unknown eyes through a text, I transformed into something else. I became a beast, a cornered prey that knows its only option is to become a predator. With a calm movement, too calm for the whirlwind roaring inside me, I leaned down and picked up the phone. My fingers didn't tremble. The cracked screen bit my skin. I read the message once more, absorbing each syllable, each hidden intention behind those clinical words. "Get up," I said. My voice was not the one from an hour ago, broken by crying. It was not the one from 3 days ago, full of overflowing joy. It was flat, metallic, a freshly sharpened steel blade. Leo looked at me, disconcerted by the tone. The fear in his eyes mixed with confusion. "Mom? Get up," I repeated, without altering the volume, but with an intensity that made him shudder. "Now." He stood up, staggering, clutching his side. His lip was bleeding again. "But what, the message?" he stammered, pointing at the phone with a trembling finger. "I've already read it." I put the phone in my coat pocket, hiding its light. Darkness enveloped us again. But now it was different. We were no longer two hidden victims. We were 2 points of consciousness in the night, stalked. They knew your number. Now they know mine. That means they have access to things, to information. They're not just thugs. They have resources. "Jake," he whispered, the name sounding like poison in his mouth. "Jake is a pawn, a useful and disposable traitor." The words came out cold, logical, while my mind connected the threads at breakneck speed. "They are professionals. This is systematic. They isolated you first. They took away your network. Me." The truth hit me with brutal clarity. The timing wasn't a coincidence. They pressured you to kick me out. Right. They gave you ideas. They intoxicated you with that rhetoric of freedom and business. Leo looked down, ashamed. A sob escaped from his throat. "Jake said you were dead weight, that money attracted toxic people, that you would become interested." A wave of anger so pure and white that it almost doubled me over ran through my entire body. They had used him. They had used the insecurity of a boy hurt by his father, his adolescent rage, his poorly digested ambition, to turn him against me, to leave him completely alone and vulnerable, to make him easy prey. "Listen to me well, Leonardo," I said, grabbing his face with both hands, forcing him to look at me. My fingers were cold against his feverish skin. In my eyes there was no longer comfort, only the reflection of the moon, and the most absolute determination. "What happened before? Your cowardice, your cruelty. We'll talk about it. If we survive this night, we'll talk about it, until there's not a word left unsaid, not a wound left unhealed. But right now, in this second, all of that is noise. Do you understand me? Noise." He nodded, slowly, his tears wetting my fingers. "This is war," I continued, my voice a whisper charged with urgency. "And in war, there are only 2 sides, them and us, and we are going to win." "Win?" he murmured, as if the concept seemed foreign to him. "Mom, they have knives, they have our number, they know everything. And we have something they don't?" I said, releasing his face and staring into the darkness beyond the fence, toward the empty alley. "We have the instinct of a mother who has just been threatened with death. And we have—" I put my hand in my bag, searching among the passports and documents, until my fingers closed around the cold and familiar metal of the key. I took it out. It hung from a keychain, shaped like a sun, worn and cheerful. A gift from Leo when he was 6 years old. The keys to my beat-up 2008 Honda Civic, parked 2 streets away, where I always leave it, because there's no space here. Leo blinked, disconcerted by the absurd turn. "The car. What does the car matter now?" "It matters," I said, sketching a cold smile. "The first of the night. That didn't reach my eyes. Because they're looking for a rich and scared boy, and his poor and defeated mother. They're looking for fingerprints, credit cards, taxis, hotels. They're looking for patterns." I squeezed the key in my fist until the teeth of the metal almost dug into my palm. "And they're not going to find that woman. That woman stayed crying on a bench in the rain. I am another. I held out my hand to him. Come with me. We left the lot through the same gap in the fence, moving like shadows. We no longer ran. We walked with silent and stealthy determination, close to the walls, blending with the night. I went first, with hyper-alert senses, scanning every dark window, every doorway, every parked car. Leo followed me, limping but silently, his breathing a faint whisper behind me. We reached the Honda, a pile of dark blue scrap metal, with dents and the exhaust pipe held with wire. The physical representation of my life, of efforts. But at that moment, it was the most beautiful vehicle in the world. It was anonymity. It was escape. I opened the driver's door with a familiar creak. The interior smelled of spilled coffee, cheap perfume, and years of trips to work. I indicated to Leo to get in and crouched down in the passenger seat, out of sight. I sat behind the wheel, closed the door, without making noise, and inserted the key. I mentally crossed my fingers. The engine coughed once, twice, and then roared with a loyalty that filled my eyes with tears for the first time in hours, but this time with gratitude. It was old, it was noisy, but it started. I didn't turn on the headlights until I had driven half a block. I drove unhurriedly, respecting speed limits, like any woman returning home from a late shift. Through the rearview mirror, I watched every pair of lights that approached. Nothing. The street slept. Where are we going? Leo asked from the floor, his voice muffled by the upholstery. To Mrs. Gable's house, I said. The old woman from the third floor? The one who always smells like cats and soup? That's the one. I sketched another humorless smile. I take her magazines on Tuesdays and change her light bulbs since she fell off the stool 2 years ago. She has a key of mine in case I forget hers, which happens often, and I have one of hers. Leo remained silent, processing the genius of the mundane. No one, not in their most paranoid dreams, would relate a millionaire fugitive to the lonely and bad-tempered old woman from the third floor of our own street. The place we had just fled from. The place no one would look at again. I parked 3 blocks away, and we went up the fire stairs, avoiding the elevator and the doorbells. Mrs. Gable's key turned in the lock with a soft click. The apartment smelled of cats, chicken soup, and mothballs. It was dark and silent. She would be fast asleep, thanks to the pills she took at 10 o'clock. We slipped inside, and I closed the door without making noise. The darkness was absolute. We sat on the floor of the entrance hall, back to back, as we had done in the closet. But this time we weren't hiding, we were regrouping. The silence was dense, only broken by our breathing, and the distant purring of a cat in some room. It was then that Leo spoke, his voice a hoarse whisper in the darkness. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said. And this time he didn't sound like a scared child, but like a man seeing the depth of the abyss he had dug, not just for kicking you out, for everything, for not seeing you, everything you did, everything you were. I didn't respond immediately. I looked toward the darkness, toward the ghostly outlines of another person's furniture, another life. "The money didn't change you, Leo," I said finally. My voice soft, but imperturbable. "It just took off your mask. And underneath, what those men found, what I saw today, was the void your father left, and the rage I didn't know how to fill." He inhaled sharply, as if I had hit him. "We'll survive this," I continued, "because we have no other choice. And when we do, you'll have a choice. You can use the money to try to fill that void with more things, more friends like Jake, more noise. Or," I paused, letting the words settle in the darkness, "you can allow the void to teach you what really matters. You can rebuild yourself from scratch, and this time, I'll be there, not to protect you from the world, but to make sure you become a man who doesn't need to kick his mother out to feel free. Before he could respond, the phone in my pocket vibrated again. Both of us tensed. The sound was obscenely loud in the silence of the apartment. I took it out slowly. It wasn't an unknown number. It was the bank. An automatic alert. Security alert. An attempt has been made to make an electronic transfer from your account for a value of $14,995,000. To authorize, please. My blood froze. They didn't just have our numbers. They had access to the account. They were already liquidating the prize. They had acted with brutal speed. And then, below that message, another appeared, from the same unknown number. Unknown number. Last chance. The transfer is on hold. Tell me where you are, and I'll authorize it. Your son lives. Don't answer, and I'll authorize it anyway. But my partner wants to practice with the knife. 60 seconds. The phone screen illuminated my face, and it must have reflected the absolute horror I felt, because Leo sat up. What? What is it? He asked, his voice loaded with panic. I didn't answer him. 60 seconds. 60 seconds. To decide my son's fate, to hand over a fortune that was a curse, to give in to terror. I looked at Leo, his swollen eye, his bleeding lip, the absolute fear in his eyes. The boy who had sung in the school choir, the teenager who had stayed up studying for a final exam, the man who had kicked me out of the house, the son who had begged me not to leave him alone. And in that instant, all the coldness, all the determination of a cornered beast, condensed into a certainty colder than steel and hotter than the sun. I wasn't going to give in. I wasn't going to run. I was going to war. With a calm that was the opposite side of madness, I lifted the phone and with fingers that didn't tremble, wrote my response. It wasn't long. It wasn't complicated. It was simple, brutal, and full of a truth that emerged from the very bowels of my being. Me. Kill him, if you have the guts, but his blood will stain your hands, not mine, and the money you want so much will turn to ash between my fingers before it touches yours. I already lost my son once today. I have no more fear to lose, but you have a lot to lose, and I now know how to find you. I turned off the phone. The shutdown beep was the most definitive sound I've made in my life. The darkness enveloped us again. Leo looked at me, not understanding. His gasping was the only sound in the universe. What did you do? He managed to say, trembling from head to toe. I looked at him. In the gloom, he was only the outline of his face, the shine of his eyes full of tears. I called their bluff, I said, and my voice sounded strange, serene and terrible at the same time. I told them to kill my son if they dare. He held his breath, a gulp of air trapped by shock. And why would you do that? He whispered, with a horror that wasn't for the threat, but for me. Because at that moment, in the loaded silence of Mrs. Gable's apartment, with the smell of cats and soup, I knew the game had changed. It was no longer about hiding. It was about winning. It was about reminding those men, Jake, the world, and my own son, a truth that everyone had forgotten. I smiled. A smile that had no joy, only the sharp edge of a dark revelation. Because I just remembered something, honey, I whispered, extending my hand to caress his wounded cheek with a tenderness that contrasted with the bomb I had just dropped. 12 years ago, when your father left us for that bitch from his office, he didn't just take his damn vinyl record collection. I leaned toward him, until my breath caressed his ear, and whispered the last truth, the one I buried with the clothes of my old life, the one no one, not even my son, knew. He took a secret, and those men, they don't want your money, Leo. They think it's theirs. Leo pulled back, his eyes wide in the darkness, trying to process what I had just revealed. What secret? What do you mean they think it's theirs? I sat back against the wall, feeling the weight of 12 years of silence lifting from my shoulders. The truth had been buried so deep, I had almost convinced myself it never existed. But now, with death breathing down our necks, it was time to excavate it. Your father, I began, my voice steady, despite the tremor in my hands, wasn't just a businessman, Leo. He wasn't just selling insurance policies and playing golf on weekends. He was laundering money, millions of dollars, for people who don't forgive and who certainly don't forget. Leo's breath caught. Money laundering, Dad? Clean money in, dirty money out. He had clients, dangerous clients, people who needed their cash to look legitimate. Your father was very good at making illegal money disappear into legal investments. Real estate, businesses. He took a percentage, of course, a very generous percentage. I could see Leo's mind racing, trying to reconcile the image of his absent father with this revelation. But if he was making so much money, why were we always struggling? Because when he left, I said, my voice hardening, he didn't just abandon us emotionally, he stole from his clients. $3 million, money that belonged to very dangerous people, money that was supposed to be cleaned and returned to them. The apartment fell silent, except for the distant ticking of Mrs. Gable's old clock. Leo stared at me, his swollen face pale in the dim light filtering through the curtains. He told them I had it, I continued, the bitterness in my voice like acid. When they came looking for their money, when they found out what he had done, Roberto pointed them in my direction, said I was in on it, said I knew where he had hidden their $3 million. My God, Leo whispered. For 12 years, I've been looking over my shoulder, working double shifts, not just to pay our bills, but to stay invisible. I changed our last name. Remember? I told you it was because I wanted a fresh start after the divorce, but it was because I was hiding from them. Leo's voice was barely audible. And now they think the lottery money is theirs. 3 million became 15 million in their minds. Interest, penalties, revenge. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. They probably think we've been living off their money all these years, and the lottery win is just us flaunting their stolen cash. But we haven't, we don't have their money. We never did. No, I said, my voice growing cold again. But try explaining that to people who've spent over a decade believing otherwise, to people who've watched you grow up, thinking you were raised on their stolen money. Leo leaned forward, grabbing my arm. Mom, we have to give them the lottery money. All of it. We have to make this stop. I shook my head slowly. It won't stop, Leo. Even if we give them every penny, it won't stop, because this isn't about the money anymore. It's about respect. It's about sending a message. Your father made them look like fools, and by extension, so did we. Then what do we do? His voice cracked like a child's. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone, my real phone, not Leo's broken one. The screen glowed in the darkness as I scrolled through my contacts to a number I had hoped never to use. We call the one person who might be able to help us, I said, my finger hovering over the contact. The one person who knows exactly who these men are, where they come from, and what they want. Leo's eyes widened as he saw the name on the screen. Roberto Morales. Dad? He breathed. But he left us. He destroyed us. Yes, I said, my voice steady as stone. And now he's going to save us. Because if he doesn't, his son dies. And even Roberto, for all his faults, for all his cowardice, wouldn't be able to live with that. I pressed the call button. The phone rang once. Twice. On the third ring, a familiar voice answered. Older, more tired, but unmistakably him. Carmen? Carmen, is that you? 12 years of silence. 12 years of abandonment. 12 years of rage. All of it compressed into 2 words. Hello, Roberto. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Carmen, how did you? I thought you'd changed your number years ago. I did. This is my work phone, the one I use for emergencies. I let the weight of that word hang in the air. And this, Roberto, is the biggest emergency of our lives. What's wrong? Is Leo okay? Despite everything, despite the years of hatred, I heard genuine concern in his voice. It was the first spark of the man I had once loved, buried under layers of betrayal and cowardice. No, I said simply. He's not okay. And neither am I. Your friends have found us. The silence stretched so long, I thought the call had dropped. When Roberto finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. Oh God! Oh Carmen, no. How did they? The lottery, I said. Leo won the lottery. $15 million. And your friends think it's the money you stole from them. They think we've been sitting on their $3 million all these years, and now we're flaunting it. The lottery? Roberto's voice trailed off. Then more urgently, Carmen, you have to run. You have to take Leo and disappear. Tonight. We tried running. They found us anyway. They have our numbers. They have access to the bank account. They have Jake feeding them information. Jake? Roberto sounded confused. Leo's best friend. Turned out to be working for them. This whole thing was orchestrated, Roberto. They've been watching us, waiting for the right moment. I heard Roberto curse in Spanish, words I hadn't heard in years. Carmen, listen to me. These people, they're not just criminals, they're professionals. They have resources, connections. If they want the money, they'll get it. If they want you dead, you'll be dead. I know that, I said, my voice calm. Which is why you're going to fix this. Fix this? Carmen? I can't. I don't have any way to. You're going to tell them the truth, I interrupted. You're going to admit that you stole their money, that we never had it, that you've been hiding like a coward for 12 years, while your family paid the price for your crimes. Carmen, please. If I contact them, they'll kill me. And if you don't, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than any scream, I'll tell them exactly where to find you myself. The line went quiet. I could hear Roberto breathing, could almost see him in whatever comfortable life he had built with his secretary, turned wife, surrounded by luxuries, bought with stolen money. You would do that? He asked, finally. You would sacrifice me to save yourself? No, I said, and for the first time since the phone call began, my voice softened slightly. I would sacrifice you to save our son, the son you abandoned, the son who's been beaten and terrorized because of your cowardice, the son who might die tonight because you were too selfish to face the consequences of your actions 12 years ago. I heard Roberto crying on the other end of the line. Quiet, ashamed tears. What do you want me to do? He asked. Call them. Tonight. Tell them the truth. Tell them you have their money, all of it, with interest. Tell them you'll give it back if they leave Leo and me alone. Carmen, I don't have $3 million. I don't even have $1 million anymore. Then you better figure out how to get it, I said coldly. You've had 12 years to prepare for this day. You knew it would come eventually. And if I can't? If they don't believe me? If they want proof? I looked at Leo, who was listening to every word with wide, frightened eyes. My son, my boy, the most important thing in my world. Then you better hope they're feeling merciful, I said, because the alternative is that your son pays for your sins with his life. I ended the call. The apartment fell silent again. Leo stared at me, his face a mixture of fear, admiration, and something that might have been hope. Do you think he'll do it? Leo asked quietly. I don't know, I admitted. Your father was always good at saving himself. The question is whether he'll try to save us too. And if he doesn't? I looked at my son, really looked at him, the scared, beaten boy in front of me, but also the man he was becoming, a man who was learning, through the worst possible circumstances, what loyalty meant, what family meant, what love, real love, demanded. Then we save ourselves, I said simply. We've been doing it for 12 years. We can do it for 12 more. Leo nodded slowly, then reached out and took my hand. His grip was firm, no longer trembling. I'm sorry, Mom, he said. And this time, the words carried the weight of understanding. For everything. For not seeing what you sacrificed. For not understanding what you protected me from. For pushing you away when you were the only person who truly loved me. I squeezed his hand. You were a child, Leo. A hurt child who needed someone to blame. I understand that now. I'm not a child anymore, he said, and I could hear the truth of it in his voice. What happens next? Whatever happens next, I'm with you, all the way. I smiled at him in the darkness. Then we wait, I said. We wait to see if your father has found his courage at last, and if he hasn't, I let the sentence hang in the air. If he hasn't, Leo prompted. If he hasn't, I said, my voice carrying the weight of 12 years of survival. Then we remind these people that they're not dealing with the scared woman who let her husband disappear into the night 12 years ago. They're dealing with the woman who raised a son alone, who worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table, who fought every day to build something good from the wreckage Roberto left behind. I stood up, pulling Leo with me. They want a war? I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. Then they've found one, because I've already lost everything once, and I have nothing left to lose except the most important thing in the world. I looked at Leo, my son, my heart walking around outside my body. And I will die before I let them take him from me again. The phone buzzed in my hand. A text message from Roberto. Roberto, I've made the call. Meeting them tomorrow at noon, Pier 47. If this goes wrong, tell Leo I loved him. I always loved him. I was just too broken to show it. I showed the message to Leo. He read it twice, then looked up at me with tears in his eyes. Do you think he means it? He asked. I think, I said carefully, that your father is about to discover what it really means to be brave, whether he likes it or not. Outside Mrs. Gable's apartment, the first hints of dawn were beginning to creep across the sky. The longest night of our lives was ending. But somehow, I knew that the real fight was just beginning.